Welcome to Reality Storyline Decoded, episode 11. I'm your host, David Mivshek. Let's get started. Today on this episode, I'm going to do a fate stack. If you haven't seen Fate Stack Solved, I've done a couple in episode 2, episode 8, and episode 9. So if you want to go back and check those out, you can. I'll go briefly over the rules and speculate a little bit. But other than that, to get more of a comprehensive view, I'd suggest looking at those episodes. All right, so today it's going to be a fate stack for band members that are in the same band, musical band. And when I do fate stacks for band members in the same musical band, it's band members that are concurrently in the same band, okay, so at the same time. So if one band member drops out, their name gets excluded. When a new band member comes in, then they're part of that band. And what I found by doing these different band member fate stacks is that you could have a band playing a music show, and let's say one of those people in the band is sick, like a guitarist or something, and somebody fills in for them. That's not included in the fate stack system. The fate stack system basically uses band members that are, listed as performers, the main performers in the band, not some paid, people that were hired just for that project for the album, but people that form the core band for that musical album. So that's where I generally get the names for the fate stacks from, is the musical album that they released. Okay, and this one is one of the first ones I did, and this is from the band Peter, Paul, and Mary, which, if you're not familiar with who Peter, Paul, and Mary are, and I don't know their biography by heart, but they were a folk band that was out, in the 1950s, 60s, and then they continued to, continuously make music and albums, and they would have other musicians come in, and they were still playing live shows, and they still may, actually. I haven't looked, but I know I saw them back in a town called Highland Park in Illinois, and that was probably in, I'm gonna take a guess, like 1997, some time ago, but I know they were still playing shows. But so when a fate stack for band members is solved, the answer has to do with the lyrics of a song that's notable by that band. For instance, in episode 2, I did a band fate stack for the band members of the band Deicide, which is a death metal band from they still might be putting out albums, but they started back in 1990, around that time. And I had done that for a specific reason for that episode, to show what's called the alphanumeric conversion chart, which is not needed for this episode. So if you haven't seen a fate stack already, and everything here is pretty low production, so it's right now a piece of paper, it's basically taking the last names of the band members. In this case, you have Yarrow, Stuckey, and Travers, okay? And you list the shortest name on top to the longest names on bottom, and if they have the same length because they have the same numbers of letters, like Stuckey and Travers in this case, then the best way that I know how to do it right now, because there's no computer program that I have that's running it, checking to see what's the better order, some rule that has to, decide which one should be on top over the other one if they're the same amount of letters. Basically, it's just, as you code break, you're like, okay, this makes sense, why this one should be above and this one should be below based on the words you're making. So there's a little subjectiveness. I like throwing it out there, but just like anything, I shouldn't say just like anything, but just as with things at times, you can whittle it down to a certain aspect, because it's basically what I'm doing is back engineering the matrix of the storyline of reality. So I'm still in the learning phase, but it still shows the answer that should come out based on the meaning of the words. Okay, so if you just try to put those last names in a different order, you're going to get words that just really create a bunch of bunk, nonsense. So that's not right. Okay, and the answer has to be about lyrics to a notable song by that band. Okay, so it's not you just make an answer that you're happy with that tells you about your neighbor down the road. That's not what this is. This is showing that because that answer has to do with lyrics by the band, okay, that means that if it can be, the system can be reproduced over different musical bands, and consistently each musical band has an answer that elucidates lyrics for a notable song that that band has created, then that just leads one to believe that it was the answer is intentionally put into those names. Or why would it continuously be about lyrics about, the answer be about lyrics which coincides with the song the band has made? At some point it would be just gobbledygook randomness. And if something is come across like a different fate stack, if it's not band members or if it is, that doesn't necessarily mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There might be an instance here and there where something's not working, just like in any other study, like math or whatever it is. You come across certain aspects where things are not matching up, and you just carry it forward until it's kind of understood sometime down the road, right? But I've done enough of these to know that they're in there, that this code is there, okay? Or else I wouldn't be telling you about it. I just didn't do this yesterday. I've been doing this for over 20 years. So these are fate stacks. I just like to give a shout out to the band members, so I'm giving them proper respect. Peter Yarrow, the name at the top of the matrix, is a vocalist and guitarist in the band. Then there's Paul Stuckey, who is a vocalist and guitarist in the band, and then Mary Travers, I'm not really sure which way it's pronounced, and she's a vocalist in the band. So one of the most popular songs that Peter, Paul, and Mary wrote and performed was the song Puff the Magic Dragon. And it's a song most kids have heard. I still think to this day, that song could be heard by, somebody, let's say between the age of 7 and 10 today, and they have been familiarized with it somehow. And if not, it was for many, many years. When I was a child, in the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, even early 90s, the song was still known because it was carried on through cartoons and different things like that. So there's books that were printed about Puff the Magic Dragon and so forth and so on. So this is a very popular song by them. It reached number 2 when they put it out. I think I read it was 1962. When they put it out, it reached number 2 on the Billboard charts, okay, in the U.S. And then other countries it reached whatever it reached, some high degree of notoriety in those countries also. So I'm going to start boxing in the letters. I'm just going to state real quick that when a fate stack is solved, if you see me solve query stacks or no fate stacks yet, they're solved basically the same way. Okay, the information's different based on what type of words they are. In this case, they're the band members, and you connect the letters either horizontally or vertically, never just diagonally. You can use each letter only once in a connection, and when you connect the letters, they should spell a word that's either like a noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, proper noun. Words that have substance to them, and it's, you try to tend to stay away from slang and interjections like words yo, things like that, which just don't add to meaning. They add attitude, but not meaning. And sometimes slang pops up and it's useful to what this, the answer is, okay? Because when you have, let's say, 10 words and 9 words go along with the answer, and then there's that one word that's a slang, but still it's like a useful slang. It's not like you can just find it in some obscure slang dictionary laying on a shelf somewhere. It's actually, a slang word you can find in the dictionary. It's commonly used slang, okay? So what I'm going to do is boxing the first group of letters by connecting them horizontally or vertically. I box them in instead of using a line because it's a lot easier to see with a big box, you know, around it. And I have to make sure that I get the correct letters boxed in, because sometimes there's similar letters by each other, and when you box in the wrong letters, when you use permanent marker, you can't go back and correct yourself without making it look messy. So the first word is story, S-T-O-R-N-Y. So once you box in those letters, you can't use those letters anymore. And once you box in the first word from this top left letter, okay, it comes out first and goes in as the first word in the first sentence or phrase. And once you get to the next word, you take that one out by going from top left to bottom right through the matrix. So you take out the words in order from top left to bottom right, and then all you do is add punctuation. So it reduces the chance that the decoder is making a sentence meaningful by rearranging the words any way they want. You strictly take it out in a strict manner and just add punctuation so it's readable. Okay, so this first word is story. And now what I'm going to do is tell you the definition of story. In this case, the definition of story is an account of some incident or event, often a tale written or told especially for the entertainment of children. So this song has become, if it wasn't intentionally written to be, it became basically a fantastical story that was, geared towards children's minds, because, the nature of the song and the characters and, the scenery and things like that. So we know right now what's being talked about is a story. If we just looked at the words and not knew what it was connected to, we know whatever song that it's speaking about, the lyrics are a story. Now the next word that I boxed in is just boxed in that letter A, because again, these letters from story are gone. Poof, you can't use those letters again. Now each letter has to be used in the matrix. There's no leftover letters. So you can't have an excuse like, well, I made all these words, but I have a Z, Y, and X left over. I can't use them. I don't know what to do. You have to figure it out how it's used. Okay, so you got story and then A. So the A leads into the next word. So what is it we're talking about? We're being talked about. And here, so these are gone now. So we keep going over and we came to the word work, W-O-R-K. So we know the story, colon, is, meaning that's what the colon is. It's like, story, what about the story? It's a work, a work. And in this sense, work means something produced. These are definitions in Merriam-Webster's Unabridged Dictionary online. These are the proved meanings, right? I'm not making them up or paraphrasing. It's something produced by the exercise of creative talent or expenditure of creative effort, meaning an artistic production. Well, so there's a story, so we know it's a tale that's written, primarily for children, and it's about some event or incident, and it was produced through an artistic effort. Well, it was a song that was written. These lyrics were written, and music and lyrics are part of the artistic realm. They're an artistic production. So that first phrase, story, a work, is already it's already letting us know, yes, we're talking about an artistic production, a song with a story, okay? Now, it doesn't tell what the lyrics are, but it's kind of like a preempt, an intro to let you know. And now we're going to talk about that story or work, okay? And you have to also think, in this case, there's 20 letters. So the answer is only using 20 letters, right? And, if you think 3 to 4 letters per word, you might get 5 words out of that. And so it has to take a lot of information and store it within a small amount of words for the meaning, okay? So the next word, which I'm going to box in before I show you, is the word roves. And you can see, so these letters are gone, these letters are gone, up to the K here. And then when I came to the second row, I came to the O because that was unused, and I got O, V, E, R, and S. Well, if you take it out, those letters you can you can anagrammatize them, make them an anagram, switch around those letters to make a word. Okay, so you can take them out and change the ordering of the letters to make a word. You can't add letters or take letters away. You can only just change the letters around. Now, somebody might think, well, there you go. I mean, you can make 40 words with that. You really? You can't. You can only make so many words with the letters O, V, E, R, and S. Okay? Maybe 2. All right? So, again, you have the word roves. In this case, it's a verb. It's an action. You're roving. It's to move aimlessly, to roam, or to stray. So we know there's something in this story or tale that's directed towards children. It's an artistic production, which we know because it's a song, right? And somebody's moving or something's moving aimlessly. It's roaming around. It's, going astray. Something like that, okay? It's roving. Now, the next box I'm going to make of letters, because now roves is gone, so that's gone. And now we have the E and the Y left over on this row, so that's Y-E for the word ye. So it's story, a work, roves, and then ye. Okay? So something is roving. What is roving? And right now we got the pronoun ye, Y-E. It's an archaic word, but it's used also commonly still, right? And you see it in like maybe shop signs. It'll be like ye old shoppe, like S-H-O-P-P-E, right? But it's also it's used to give that archaic flavor just whenever you want to use it that way, basically, right? And what ye means is, it means you is directing it towards somebody. It's a direct address. Like if in let's say you are playing guitar, right? Or you play guitar. It could be ye plays guitar, okay? And so I'm not going to read you the full definition, but I just paraphrased that for you. Okay, in this sense, it's used plurally, okay? Because once the story's understood and the lyrics are read, you understand ye is not directing necessarily towards one person, it's directing it towards 2 people, I believe, right? Yeah, it's a plural pronoun, okay? So we know there's more than one object or person that's roving, okay? And when I boxed in the last 3 letters, because I took away the E and the Y, and I went now down to this row, and I boxed in T, R, and A, and that spells the word art, if you look at it backwards. Or, I'm sorry, my fault, not art, tar, T-A-R. It does spell art, but in this case, it's tar, okay? And the reason I'm saying it's tar is because when you look at the sentence, if I was to put art, it'd be like, how does that make sense? It doesn't make sense to the lyrics at all. But when you put in the word tar, it makes total sense, because a tar is a shortening of the word, and that's in the dictionary. It's not me shortening it for this purpose. A tar is a tarpaulin, T-A-R-P-A-U-L-I-N, which is a seaman, S-E-A-M-A-N. It's a seaman or a sailor, okay? So we know there's a story based on these phrases. There's 2 phrases. Story, a work, and we know story, a work means that there's a tale, usually geared towards children, that is based on an artistic production, which we know we're talking about lyrics and music, and something is aimlessly moving about, and it's ye, meaning a plural, and I put the slash here to represent that the ye is 2 of these objects, or 2 tars, okay? You got the ye and the tar is telling the reader that the plural is there's 2 of each beings that are each a tar, okay? So each is a sailor or a seaman. Now, seaman. So when the lyrics are read, okay, for the song, and the copyright on music lyrics is very, very strict in how you can use lyrics when you speak about it or write about it. You can't just write lyrics down in your book about some band and you go and publish it, and and that's not copyright infringement. It is. It's really strict. You're only allowed to use, if it's like 2 lines of a song, or maybe so many words of a song before it becomes, copyright infringement. So in this case, I have to shorten. I suggest you can go listen to the song. Just pull up Puff the Magic Dragon on whatever media site you're using, YouTube or Rumble, whatever. I guarantee you're going to find it. It's going to pop up probably hundreds of versions. Okay? Now, in verse 3, in the first line of that verse, okay, let me just say generally the whole song is about this boy named Jackie Paper, okay, and he has a magical dragon friend named Puff. And they get together and they go sailing on, a sea that they live near, okay? And that when they go traveling on the sea, it doesn't necessarily say where they're going. They're just traveling the sea, and they go past like kings and queens who bow to them. Pirates lower their flags when they go by, stuff like that. So it doesn't give any direct, like they get on the boat and go shopping across the harbor. They just go sailing. So the line that this answer represents is, and quote, together they would travel on a boat with billowed sail. So you have a dragon and Jackie Paper, the little boy, on a boat traveling on the sea, right? So that would mean they're moving about on the sea. It doesn't give direction, so one can just see them aimlessly going about on the sea, right? Wherever they sail, and they're on a boat. So they're sailing, and it even says with a billowed sail, it has a sail, and that gives the impression that they're like a sailor, right? In a general sense. They didn't sign up for the military and become a sailor, right? Not in that sense, but they're sailing the sea. They're a sailor, okay? So each of them. The dragon is on the boat too, right? So that's a fate stack that has to do with band members, okay? For the band Peter, Paul, and Mary. And it represents the song Puff the Magic Dragon. I'm going to do in the next episode another, unless something changes, but probably, I'm going to do another fate stack for musical band members, and it's going to be the Beatles. Okay, so stay tuned for that one. But I have made this book, Reality Storyline Decoded, back in like 2009, I think. Let me look. I don't even remember. It was so long ago. It was 2013. And I have a chapter or two listed in the book for that focuses on fate stacks. And it does have this fate stack in it. Okay, everything in this book is a little bit rudimentary. It's when I first started figuring all these different codes out, fate stacks, query stacks. I have many other types too that I'm going to get to down the road, lottery code and whatever it may be. And this was just a way for me to throw all my ideas into a book so I didn't lose any of that information, because I had come out of some hard times and I'm like, I got to make sure I save not just on a floppy disk back then or a CD-ROM or whatever it was. I need to make sure I have that in a hardcover form. So if I lose that information on the computer, or I lose a computer or have to sell it or whatever, I have the information written down. So it's a little sloppy. It goes through a bunch of different ideas and things. Some I need to go back over, but a couple of fate stacks are in here. And my goal is to take fate stacks out of there and make a whole book just dedicated to fate stacks, like I did for query stacks in this book, Reality Storyline Decoded 2 Query Stacks, which are different than fate stacks. And I have talked about those in episode 3 to episode 7. And that lists, a lot of the first, 4 query stacks I did, plus an extra one that was like the 10th one in the series, just to give you an idea what query stacks are and what the difference is. But you can buy this book on Amazon.com, Reality Storyline Decoded 2 Query Stacks. It's 484 pages, and it's not just me pontificating on what could be and what is that. It's just a bunch of query stacks in order, listing them in order, and telling you all the information you need to know about them before I moved on to the next chapter. Each chapter is a query stack. And then after that, I analyze and do different things to show how it corroborates with biblical information and things like that. And this is a deck of cards next to the book, so you can see it's 8.5 by 11. So you're getting your money's worth for $50. It's basically a college textbook, and it's written like that too. So, if you can help me out, that's great. Basically, what I'm doing, if you don't understand maybe what's going on with my study, and the basic name of the study is called ordotics, which I gave a more meatier introduction to in episode 10, the episode before this one. And ordotics is basically the idea that you take letters like you do numbers in math, but different type of operations, more code breaking operations like decoding fate stacks or query stacks, and to come up with an answer rather than, let's say, adding numbers or subtracting them to come up with an answer. And when you do mathematics, you're measuring the physical universe. So you walk around your environment, right? You have a wall. You can measure the wall. You can hit the attack of your knuckles onto the wall, and different things like that through measurements, right? And you can measure other things that are in the setting, whatever it may be. But if you're trying to use math to tell the story of the day that you're going through, you can't do it. You can't say, well, let me just give you all the numbers of my day and I can tell you all the things I did today, the events from one event to the next. You can only do that by discussing it or talking it. When you talk it or write it down, you're doing that in language with letters, alphabetical letters. And so my study says, okay, on the other side, the flip side of math is ordotics. It's using letters and manipulating those letters to understand the basis of the storyline of life. Because you go through your day living a story. You may not look at it that way because you might just see it one event to the next event. But if you could step back and look at your whole day from like a bird's eye view and watch the whole day, it's basically like, you can say a day if it's compared to like a chapter in a book. You could write it like a chapter in the book, right? And if you wanted to, let's say, shorten that book down because it'd be a lot of writing, you could start just using keywords that start to make sense across different situations. And now that becomes like a code, right? And so that's basically what ordotics does. It says reality is set up like a computer game, almost like a video game with a code that's like being ran in the background, and what things are basically, being, so there's something interpreting that code and making it like a three-dimensional reality with the storyline. Just like there's a computer game code that's something's generating that information in the computer to make it a two-dimensional, game with a setting and storyline on your computer screen. And there's been, different philosophers, contemporary ones of the day, people who have gone to Harvard and Yale and all these different things, and they're the premier science people or whatever. And they basically, in the early 2000s, and this is not where I got it from, I was already doing this, they were like, oh, what if life was like a simulation? And they believe life is a simulation, but they don't ever go past that, right? It's just, we think it's this. And everybody's like, oh my God, it could be that. That's fine. That's great to get your mind working. But I'm just saying, comparatively, I'm giving you the code. I'm not saying it's a simulation, right? I'm saying it's actually happening, and it's a code that's being produced, that's running it. Okay? So if you're thinking, well, why would that be? Who would make the code? And well, that's the thing. That's the whole point. If you logically can't put your finger on how this code would be made, because no humans made it, because no humans conspired to do this as a group in the past, in the present moment or anything. They didn't come up with their last names to put a code of the lyrics that they sang within their names, right? So you have to think, okay, this goes way back into the past, right? So the only thing existing at that time were ancient humans, which you have to then would think if they did it, the ancient humans, which were supposedly somewhat not as intelligent as us, I guess, were planning and plotting these codes for the future for mankind, which there would probably be some type of written history on that somewhere. And that just seems like, why would they be doing that anyway? Maybe they made their own little games of codes and it lasted like 3 minutes back then, like a board game or something like that. But to think they were trying to make it work for some reason for mankind in the future is probably just a little too much, especially since words and everything change from one country to the next when people travel, and the meanings change, and words get carried on through, with different ethnic groups and different wherever. It's just the evolution of language would, and the complexities of it would pretty much debunk the idea that ancient humans put it in language on purpose. And to think like, let's say, well, then who did it, right? Then aliens did it. Well, if aliens did it, then they would have had to preconceive everything that was going to happen for people and events and put this storyline within people's last names and, make sure these people actually did what they were supposed to do. So the codes, when they came to it, or when they came together, they formed a band and played that song, so it worked along with the code, which seems to be like, well, if it's going to go that far, then these extraterrestrial beings would basically be God. Okay, so that's what it brings the focus down to, is God, the person making, or the being, however you want to look at it, making the code. Okay, in the sense like a computer game programmer would make a code for a video game. You as a character in the video game is not going to see the code, right? You're just going to be doing your robotic thing and going about your day doing what you're supposed to do according to what the code tells you to do. The person playing the game, right? If they don't know how to read video game code, even if they could see it, they'll just play the game. They're just going to try to get that character to the next level as best as they can, and they're not going to pay attention to the video game. They're just going to be immersed in their two-dimensional screen. And then the only person that would be able to understand every aspect of that video game would be the one that made the code. And they would see the actual setting and storyline of that video game as it's being played, because they could play the game, but at the same time, they know the code that's generating it, right? They know it's not just let's say, again, I use Super Mario Brothers. It's not just a coin that's actually in the air. It's not a pipe that Mario Brothers is actually jumping on before he jumps on the back of turtles. It's a computer game code building up that scene. And at any time, if the computer game code is written incorrectly, it'll basically just stop the game from working. Basically, in most, in a rudimentary case, if there's not code written to override that. So you can look at reality like there's somewhat of a video game maker that's produced we'll call it a three-dimensional reality, to keep it simple, for humans to be the characters in, okay? And there's a code, which is a script that these characters play out, these humans, which brings about other, topics like morality and events that occur, throughout the day to people. When people think, oh, this video game maker's on our side, he's for us, he's a good video game maker, wants good things to happen to us all the time. And if something bad happens, well, it was like an opponent of God. And, it becomes all this issue. But when it comes down to it, there's a video game maker who made everything. And if you assign that name to that video game maker, God, okay, whatever you assign the name of to that being, it's the same thing, the being that created everything, right? And the code, and put these messages within the code for people to find, right? The only assumption one can really make is that if the computer game, if the reality game maker is the inventor and has a code within everything, and good things happen and bad things happen to people in these events, then the video game maker is the one that made it all. It wasn't like some little shadowy figure from, from some place that this video game maker doesn't know where it came from, comes in and messes up the game, and then, the script of the game, the code of the game, then runs away, and the video game maker's like, well, I don't know what to do. I can't correct it. I don't know how. I guess bad things are going to happen to people. It's like, so it brings about all these questions, but it lets us understand who God really is without making excuses for God, without saying, well, God's incomprehensible, works in mysterious ways, I just don't understand it. It says, no, you're not allowed that ignorance anymore. You're only allowed if you look at the information, to understand God as the way God really is. Okay? Now, I know some people may say, well, the Bible tells me all that. The Bible tells you some of it. Okay? It doesn't tell you all of it. There's more information the Bible does not tell you about God. And if God wants you to know more about God, God's not interested in competing with the Bible. God would know more than the Bible would, okay? So if God wants to give more information, you got to allow God to give you that information, and you have to listen to it and understand it and take it into who you are as a being, right? So I'm not saying that, lightheartedly, and I really mean that because I've done these codes for over 20 years. I know there's a script. I know this is scripted out, right? And if it's God that scripted it out, then I can only tie myself to concepts, for truthful concepts that show me based on these codes how God really is and how God really acts and what God really wants and what God's real intentions are. Even if I think I'd rather not have that to be that, those intentions or that type of personality for a God, like I'd rather be invented by another God that maybe has not been doing these bad things, whatever it is, I have to admit, based on the truth, if I want to live a truthful life and understand reality in totality without excuse, I need to just see the information for what the information bears out without injecting belief or misguided faith. And I'm not saying all faith is misguided, but it is when you're not paying attention to what you see in front of your eyes. Again, my name is David Mivshek. This is Reality Storyline Decoded podcast. See you next episode.